Welcome to the December 12th, 2023 Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee. The meeting is now called to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bozzi?
Here.
Mr. Castile?
Here.
Dr. Davis?
Here.
Ms. Ellis?
Here.
Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Ms. Holloway?
Here.
Mr. Malrin?
Here.
Mr. Morris?
Here.
Ms. Orange-Jones?
Here.
Mr. Rock?
Here.
Ms. Boucher?
Here.
Ms. Clifton? We have a quorum.
Great. Our next item, please.
All right, we have a consideration of the recognition of Central Community School System as a Model of Excellent recipient for 2023. The recommendation is to recognize.
The motion that's been a second. Dr. Yes, sir. Thank you. Dr. Volpe was the second. Yeah.
Would just like, as a point of privilege, I guess, is just to recognize Mr. Paul Hollis, who is here, and also Mr. Kevin Bergen, who are here, incoming members for 2024 of the board. I'm not sure if there are any other incoming members, but just wanted to recognize them for their presence here today. So one of the things that we enjoy doing is recognizing excellence or the quest for excellence. And the most prestigious award that we offer as an agency is our Models of Excellence Award. And we've given a handful of those over the last few years to deserving schools or deserving systems. And most recently, we had the good fortune and honor to be in the Central Community School System to recognize that community and that system for some of the good work that they are doing over there. And I'll tell you, I think Central not only is a strong system, but I think too it's a system that really is on the rise. I think we will continue to see increased academic improvement for students within that particular community school system, and that is exciting. But we recently recognized them to honor their work around what they call their win model, whatever I need model. And what they do essentially throughout the entire school is they identify the individual needs of students throughout their campus, including multiple schools, and then they tailor very specific interventions and or extensions to meet the needs of those students. And they do it uniformly across the entire school system. And so we had the opportunity to go and see that in action. We had the opportunity to engage with them and learn more about the process. And they will tell you, and I've shared this with you about other recipients in the past, that they are not exactly where they want to be, but they are doing something that is showing early promise in moving those academic results for students. And so we did recognize them, and we are glad to have them here present with us today. And so, of course, we did the big award presentation at their school, invited the community, and that was all great. But would like to let the system come up and make a few comments. And I see that Dr. Jason Fountain is here. So Dr. Fountain, if you wouldn't mind, just come up to the front, turn on your microphone, and tell us a little bit about this initiative there in Central. Because what we hope to do is not just recognize you all, but also allow other systems to, as appropriate, replicate the efforts.
No, first of all, I just want to thank you all for this honor. Had a great event, I think back on October 12th. This model we really started several years ago, and essentially every school has a 30-minute time built in every day. Some schools do it 5 days a week. We do a minimum of 90 minutes, certain at all of our schools, from our pre-K all the way through seniors. And so essentially, students, they will take common assessments, things like that, and then our teachers look at that, and then they will take the kids who need extra help, and there's this 30-minute block every day. They pull them into different groups, and then kids who are meeting the standards, they will give them academic enrichment opportunities. So we're certainly not where we want to be, as you said, but we love the model. I think the hardest thing was getting the time baked into the schedule, and then once we did that, now it's just continuing to try it. Just kind of rinse and repeat and just keep doing it so we can refine the process. And look, I'd just like to say also, I want to thank the school systems relations team. That's Trey Foltz and Jennifer and Joni and Kelly. They do such a great job, and I want to publicly just take the opportunity to say what an awesome job they do and how they support our school system. So I just want to throw that out on that opportunity.
Great. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Morris?
Yes, sir. Superintendent, you could maybe share a little bit of the student response to this initiative, some of the feedback you got from the students.
So I think initially, people, of course, our younger kids in elementary, they just do what you ask them to do. As you move into middle school and high school, I think they're a little more skeptical about these extra programs. The high school is probably your biggest challenge. We certainly look at it from a standpoint in the subjects. We'll try to give them extra support, also ACT support, things like that. But what's also been good are the extra opportunities, because they'll pull in other things, and they call it flex at the high school. They actually give kids the opportunity to do extra enrichment activities, and we feel like this is an important piece of the puzzle to make kids want to be at school. And so I think the kids have really latched onto it. Again, as we said, in middle school, probably your most challenging middle school and high school. But in our early grades, the kids were really receptive to it, and our parents have been as well.
Anyone else? Great. Thank you. Well, congratulations again. Wonderful job, work. We greatly appreciate all the work you do and your faculty throughout the community.
Mr. Castillo, we obviously have already done a complete awards celebration, but I would just like Dr. Fountain for you and your team to rise and let us give you a round of applause.
Yeah. Oh, center.
Yeah, the podium.
Great, thank you. Our next item, please.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 5.1 and 5.4 through 5.6, and pulling item 3.1.
Great, can I get a motion, please? Ms. Holloway and Dr. Davis. All right, no presentations, any objections, the motion passes. Next item?
So we're going to go to page 1, item 3.1, consideration of the 2024-2025 non-public school academic classifications report, to renew previously approved non-public school classifications and to consider new non-public schools and academic classifications. The recommendation is to approve.
May I get a motion, please? Motion from Mr. Locke, second by Mr. Morris. Any comments, report? We have one public comment card. Ms. Tanika Shaw wishes to speak, opposes the motion. Great, would you come up? Make sure your microphone is turned on. State your name, and then you may proceed.
Good morning. I am Tanika Shaw. I am the aunt of Harper Vining. I come before you today, I understand for under 3.1 as consideration for approval of these schools. One school in particular I'm calling to your attention is site code 621001, McMillan's First Step CDC Academy on page 9 and 19 of your attachment to 3.1. This school was recently used for harming my niece. She was burned, and her hand was placed into a bottle warmer, and I have hit for the record. Her hand was placed into the bottle warmer by one of the workers of the school who has been arrested. However, the school was deficient in calling the police. The school was deficient in notifying the Department of Education, of the incident. They interviewed the person in question and let her go home. It was only because of the efforts of the parents that this person was arrested. And the DA's office is now handling it, and they're also looking into whether other people should be charged for the neglect that happened to my niece. I have pictures here for the record, so everyone can see, and I apologize that I only have one copy, but you can see the burns that happened to the 6-month-old baby. So I advise today just to ask that you investigate this facility. They've been investigated before by the local news. Fox 8 News in New Orleans have investigated them. Reserve investigated for their practices in the past. Also, Fox 8 News did a story, which I have also that article regarding the harm that was done to this child in bringing up the past events that happened with the school and their possible misspending. So we're asking today that before you go to renew this particular facility, that you do the investigation and consider not renewing it, because they have had many deficiencies before, and I'm trying to make sure that other people's children are not harmed before they get more federal and state dollars. Any questions?
Right.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes, ma'am. Can you give us the address of this facility?
It's on Carrollton, and I'm sorry, I don't have the address right in front of me.
That's okay, Carrollton Avenue.
Carrollton Avenue, New Orleans.
That's good enough.
And like I said, I have for the record, the news articles from Fox 8. Also, this was a national media site, The Shade Room, picked up this story and did an investigation also. And in that story, you had many people in the demographic that reached the Shade Room. They reached out to the mother because they have kids there. So even though you haven't heard anything, there are people who are concerned about their children attending this school.
Mr. Garvey.
For the superintendent. Superintendent, what would be the next steps for addressing this potential issue?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to connect with our staff and see what they've already explored, if anything's been elevated to us at this particular school, and then, you know, look at what might could happen. But I'm not aware of anything relative to this school at this particular point, but I certainly can connect with our staff.
Please do, if you don't mind, and let me know what comes up. Thank you.
Would it be appropriate to pull this particular school from the list?
I
for
move that we,
consideration?
for consideration, yes, I move that we remove, is it McMahon's?
McMillan and First Steps.
First step from the
Second.
list. Is
All
I,
right. There's a motion to remove McMillan from the list for consideration, seconded by Mr. Garvey and others. Any objection to that particular motion? That motion passes. Which now, Dr. Davis?
So I'm just curious about the process here. So does a police report like this automatically trigger an investigation with the Department of Education, or does the parent have to file a complaint? Because I just want to give some guidance to these individuals that if it is not an automatic investigation by the department and parents need to file a complaint, that we tell them where they need to go to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Joan Hunt, our executive counsel, to come forward with that information.
Yes, so I'll just add, this is a early childhood center, so I think we should maybe look into this. The schools for the non-public classifications are K-12 schools. So I just think we should, before you like definitely move forward, we can maybe look into it and finalize it tomorrow. But I just want to make sure we're looking at the correct school and everything before we move on.
Yes, and thank you, Shan, that's what I was going to say, John Hunt. This is actually a licensed daycare center, and you are aware of the instance that's been investigated, and we're addressing it. But it's, to Ms. Davis's point, it's not the school, it's the licensed child care center where this occurred.
So does that mean then that the motion around the school needs to go forward, approving it potentially on Wednesday while an investigation into the pre-K center is what we really need to be focused on, since they're two distinct entities? I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
And I would object to that because they're under the same house. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to do as a facility for children, that cannot speak for themselves, how do we know that they're doing the same things? Like I said, this is not their first foray into the public, like I said, these are doing an investigation into them misspending federal and state dollars before, and I don't know what happened with that investigation, but what I'm saying to you is, I was the director for Jefferson Parish's community development, and when we talked about homelessness, it doesn't stop at the door. Just because they're deficient on the nursery side, does not mean that they're not going to be deficient on the side of the school also. So I think when you're looking at the school, you have to look at the school and the nursery as a whole. So I would object to not moving forward on them at this point without looking at them as a whole, because they're under the same umbrella, they're under the same roof.
So Dr. Davis, I mean, while I appreciate that point, certainly for every child to be taken care of, I mean, there are different regulations for these K-12 versus the early care side. So why don't, if it's acceptable, just let us over the course of today, do a review around this particular side, and we can report that back out tomorrow.
Right, and I do think it's appropriate we did, because as I'm looking on the list that we have to approve this morning, they're classified, I'm looking at McMillan's, it's pre-K3, pre-K4, and also K9. So it would look like we would be approving the entire setup today. So I think it is appropriate, let's pull it off, and then maybe by tomorrow we can have some guidance in terms of what we need to do with it, if we need to separate this off.
Okay, sorry, Charles.
Follow up. I agree entirely, but I'm just trying to understand, is it the same administration, the same leadership body run, or are they multiple leadership bodies?
Again, I mean, we have
You don't know?
just under 2,000 schools, so I don't know the
Okay.
exact figure. But we're happy to
From my
explore.
understanding, it is the same, so, but I don't want to say 100%, but I believe it is the
Consider
same.
it on Clay.
Yeah.
It's on Clay than it was. Because in the New Orleans area, it was a big story. I saw it on the news. And the facility itself is on Clay.
And the motion has been to remove this from our list for consideration. That'll give the department time to conduct an investigation, come back with more information, clarify any procedural issues or defects, and we can either address it tomorrow or at some later date.
Thank you so much. You can mark the exhibits, break the record for the.
Ms. Davis has those. Thank you for your comments. I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
Thank you so much.
Right, that said, we still have a motion, a main motion to consider the entire list. There was a motion, there was a second to that. Any objection to the original motion? All right, that motion now passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 24, item 4.1, consideration of the test security irregularities report for the 2022-2023 school year. The recommendation is to receive.
Is there a motion? Mr. Melloran, second, Ms. Gorchet. So report from the department. No report other than what's in the packet. Any comments, questions from the board? If not, any objection to the motion? The motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 64, item 4.2, consideration of a discussion regarding the implementation of the policy concerning graduation appeals process. The recommendation is to receive.
I get a motion to receive. A motion by Ms. Lawrence-Jones, second by Dr. Davis. Any discussion? Mr. Garza.
Yes, I'd like to ask Alex to come to the table, please.
Now, this is just on the implementation of the policy, correct?
Yeah, just as Alex approaches, this is not with respect to funding or financing, which is, I understand this on the administration and finance committee agenda.
Correct.
Correct.
And as Mr. Ryan Fox takes the seat, I'd like to ask, I guess it would be the superintendent, this rule that's mentioned in this item, if I understand it right, has been submitted for final publication, is that correct?
I believe that would be a question for the best judge.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. It's my understanding that there's still, the fight that was filed with the fiscal and economic impact statement that was filed with the notice of intent contained a statement that there would be an associated increase in state funding expenses or expenditures associated with this. Mr. Weinbach, you've expressed in the past that it would be inappropriate for this rule to be submitted for final publication if there was a vice that contained that statement. Are you still of that opinion?
Really, all I'll say at this point, Mr. Garvey, is that my opinion has not changed from what I've given y'all previously. If y'all want to go into any further depth into that topic, then I'm going to want to go into executive session to discuss any of those attorney-client privilege matters.
Well, can you tell us what you said your opinion is the same. Can you tell us what your opinion was, that it is the same? Is it that this was inappropriate, it was inappropriate to submit this for
That
final
the
rule?
existence of that statement in the FICE violates the statute that we talked about previously. But any further than that, it's up to you in executive
Okay.
session.
To my knowledge, no new FICE has been issued. That FICE still stands. That statement of expenditures of state funds still is in the record. Mr. Ronwood said his previous opinion that it would be inappropriate to submit this for a final rule, final publication, still exists. I'd like to make a motion that we, I think the proper term would be to cancel this rule, rescind this rule. I'd like to make that motion. Thank you.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion made by Mr. Garvey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Castile. So board members, connected to what the issue that Mr. Garvey's raising, I and Dr. Davis and Ms. Davis, our executive director, was able to meet with individuals from the Division of Administration who were able to walk us through the process relative to funding. So what Mr. Garvey's bringing up is connected to the fiscal impact statement. And so we checked in with the Division of Administration to make sure that we had an appropriate way to fund the work that needs to happen in order for the appeals process to move forward. We also, I mean, you all know, but I'll just remind you that this policy has been well debated, and we've had multiple public meetings about it. I mean, going all the way back to March. But I think it's really important for you to note in the, that we did appear before the legislature. There's a legislative oversight committee. The legislature was able to look at the policy, that we answered questions of them about the policy. And they had a certain opinion of it. They sent that opinion to the governor, and the governor, I don't know the exact term, I'm going to say overruled. I don't know if that's the exact legal term or not. So he's weighed in on it, the Division of Administration has weighed in on it. And so, you know, there have just been so many communications, I would say, about this and attempts to derail this policy. And I think even in a way that could interfere with the board itself, right? Like there were attempts to have me not submit the policy, even though we've gone through all these steps. You all have supported a motion for us to move forward with the final rule. And I think that would set a very, very dangerous precedent. You know, I understand there are certain people who do not like this policy. I think they're wrong about it. I think it's a great policy. I'm proud of it. I think it's going to allow educators to serve kids in an incredible way. And so I would just ask you to vote no to what Mr. Garvey has to say. And then I'll also just let you know that in the 8G discussion, which I believe is 6.2 in the admin and finance meeting later today, we'll be able to show you the plan to be able to appropriately fund this item.
Mr. Garvey.
Yes, I think that this would be directed to Mr. Ronbaugh. Ms. Bovee spoke of the possibility of addressing a funding issue. The question I have for you is the statute that we would apparently be violated, which I think would set a worse precedent than what Ms. Goldie was talking about. Does the statute say that the FICE has to be, well, your interpretation of the statute would it be that the FICE would have to be corrected and reissued if a funding issue were changed or corrected?
That's correct. The statute talks about the existence of a financial and economic impact statement approved by the Legislative Fiscal Office that includes that designation that there's an increase in expenditure in state funds. That's the trigger for that statute.
And I would make the point that even if what Ms. Bovee is saying might happen, does happen, there still would be no reissuance of a new FICE in time for the printing of this rule on December 20th. Getting a new FICE is a whole different process, and so we would still be violating statute 49, I think it's 961.
Before you answer, you sort of preface your earlier comments about attorney-client communication, giving counsel to the board, and your wish that this perhaps occur in executive session. And as you are being asked to now give advice, I just want to ask you, would you prefer to do this here in public, or would you like to do this in executive session with your client?
I think the question that's been asked previously was okay. I'm not sure what Mr. Garber's next question is.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your response, your last response.
I think what we've done so far is okay. I don't know what Mr. Garvey's next question is, so depending on what his specific question is.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you asked the question, and before you answered, I jumped in. But was that a question?
Let me ask the question, it may not have been. If what Ms. Bovee is expecting to happen later on today, to switch funding around, which might solve the funding issue, wouldn't we still need to have a new FICE issued by the Legislative Fiscal Office before it would be proper to go forward with the final publication of this rule?
Mr. Garber, I think I answered that with my last question. The statute is triggered by the financial and economic impact statement, so that's the same answer.
So that's a yes?
Essentially, yes.
So what he's saying is we would still be violating the statute 49:951 if we do not rescind this rule.
Any other comments, questions from the board? I think there's a motion. Thank you, sir. And it's been seconded. Everybody understands the motion? Do we need to have it read again? Right.
Yeah, just for clarification, can we be clear about what a yea represents or what a nay represents?
Motion, yes, to rescind.
There's a motion to rescind the policy. A vote yes is to rescind the policy. Mr. Garvey's made a motion. There's been a second. All in favor of that motion, let's do a roll call, please.
Dr. Bovee?
No.
Dr. Bovee votes no. Dr. Davis?
No.
Dr. Davis votes no. Ms. Ellis?
Yes.
Ms. Ellis votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Ms. Holloway?
Yes.
Ms. Holloway votes yes. Mr. Mellerin?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Mellerin votes yes. Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Morris votes yes. Ms. Orange-Jones? No. Ms. Orange-Jones votes no. Mr. Rock?
No.
Mr. Rock votes no. Ms. Boucher?
No.
Ms. Boucher votes no. Mr. Castile?
No.
Mr. Castile votes no. Motion fails.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
I have a motion on this as well, Mr. Castile.
Yes, ma'am.
So I move to direct the department to update the student transcript system with the appeal as an option and require the identification of the industry-based credentials, TOPS Tech, or work keys, and to clarify in department guidance pursuant to the ESEA, the state academic content standard shall apply to all public schools and all public school students in the state and include the same level of achievement expected of all students. Therefore, the department shall define content proficiency around the granting of a diploma through the appeal process on the same level as that of students graduating without the appeal.
All right, there's a motion by Dr. Wilkie. Is there a second? Dr. Davis. All right, discussion from the board, comments. We have a couple of comments, but we want to get those in. We can do that now. Ms. Bridget Nealon poses the recommendation, wishes to speak, and then next we'll have Brian Davis with 5B, who opposes the recommendation and also wishes to speak. Ms. Nealon, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you. Bridget Nealon. We've gone through this many times, so I won't kill the point, but I just want to say I have concerns that the guidelines that Dr. Bothy is asking the department to bring is significantly changing the policy that you passed for this advertising. I think this is incredibly problematic. We have no evaluative rubric or any kind of evaluation that ensures rigor and consistency across the board in granting these waiver diplomas. And that is all I really wanted to say. Thank you.
Brian Davis with Lobby. I'll be brief as well, since y'all have already voted to not rescind it today. Apparently it's going to pass anyway. Just to let you know, we are still extremely opposed to this, and we will work to, once there's a new BESI board, to get rid of it. And we think it's just terrible for students. Thank you.
Thank you both. All right. So, okay. Mr. Garvey? Any other questions? Mr. Morris?
I do.
All right, Ms. Holloway, I'm sorry.
I'm not quite sure. Is Dr. Superintendent Bromley, are you able to speak about what's proposed here? In your opinion, what do you
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I remain opposed to the policy, but the board speaks and we meet the will of the board. A few concerns I think that I should list. I think the board needs to be aware of at least a few issues here that are substantial changes to what presently exists. Number one, I think Dr. Bothy in the motion calls for the level to be approaching basic, which is what I believe is being indicated that students need to achieve in order to meet the definition of the appeal. And I understand the rationale for that because students who are taking the LEAP test have to score the approaching basic in order to graduate. I do want to point out, though, that in terms of language in the policy that was approved, it does call for proficiency. And in Bulletin 118, proficiency is defined for us and for schools across the state of Louisiana as mastery. And so we use the term loosely, mastery, to mean proficiency, but it's also backed up by that's what BESI policy calls proficiency. So mastery is proficiency. So had the policy said approaching basic, that would have been one thing, and I think that's what Dr. Bothy is suggesting. But I do want to just make sure that the board has awareness around the fact that this is a change from what we call proficiency with an exception in this particular policy. The next thing I would call out here is that I will have to, I think I have an obligation to inform school systems on the first page of the policy, C1H, it asks them to report immigrants. And so federal code does prevent the collection of immigrants except via a Department of Commerce American Community Survey. And so I do feel a bit of an obligation to report to school systems that they cannot collect information on immigration status. And so I think that will be important for school systems to know. So just wanted to make those 2 points to the board.
I have a question for the superintendent relative to timeline. When can districts expect to hear from you, Dr. Brumley, in terms of having some clarity and implementation guidance?
Yeah, so certainly what we want to do, all as soon as possible, is minimize any confusion in the systems around this particular policy. I shared with the officers of the board, I believe on Friday, a set of guidance that could be used to match the particular policy. I asked that if you guys had any feedback as officers on that particular policy, that you share that back with me. You did. You shared that back yesterday. So we're going to spend time crosswalking the feedback that you've given us versus the guidance that we initially developed, and have that available for school systems before the 20th, because as I appreciate, unless something changes, that's the date this goes into effect. In regards to the transcript system, it's going to take some time to do the tech work behind a build out of what you're asking for. And so for us in the interim, I think the easiest way to solve for this for school systems that doesn't create a lot of extra work is for them to click the exemption tab and to sign an affidavit of what that means. It is the appeal process for the lease. Because we don't have time to go in from a computer programming standpoint and develop those tabs. We will, but we don't have the time now. So what we're suggesting at this point is a click on the exemption tab with the signed affidavit of what that particularly means for that particular student.
So how long did it take to create the exemption tab? How long was that exemption tab created during the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Do we have somebody that's available that can answer that question? Because I feel like there are people who want to call this a waiver or an exemption, and that's not what it is. I mean, we have an in-depth appeal policy, and I may not be so sensitive if we wouldn't have this kind of back and forth. But you have publicly stated that you're against the policy. You've stated that you continue to be against the policy. And so that's why I'm probably more sensitive than I ordinarily would be about the language that you use. This is an appeal process. Not every child who's eligible gets it, and there are certain steps that people have to take. And the one I'm most proud of is the one connecting students to workforce options in the community. I mean, I believe, we've talked about transforming high schools, but I believe this policy stands to position us to serve our students in a more productive way. And so I want you to know that language really matters.
Yeah, but we are not adverse to creating the box that you want us to create. It's just going to take a moment to do that. And so what we've created in the meantime is a form that the school systems can sign off if they do check that particular exemption box. I would argue that it is an exemption in that the students are exempt from having to successfully pass the LEAP assessment. But we are going to build that out. But in the interim, this is a form that can be used to satisfy the requirement.
Do you know how long it's going to take you to fix it? I understand by December 20th, and some systems have these mid-year graduates. So how long after that is it going to take you to update the student transcript system?
As soon as we can possibly do it. What we're trying to do is to create a format that it can be done immediately on the 20th, which is an existing box that can be checked by school systems with the form. Ms. Borgia?
Yeah, just as a follow-up question, I don't think it's an exemption. We have young kids that the same diploma, whatever, we don't consider that an exemption, and they don't pass the LEAP test. So we have some precedents there as to what this is. But having said that, I have an objection to a form when we're looking at giving, I don't have an objection to the form if we're looking at putting that same information, and then once you have the capability of putting it into STS, that then it is entered in. Because we need to see, did the student go through the top stack, meaning scoring the 17 ACT and those criteria with coursework? Did he get a silver on the work keys or the industry-based certification? So as long as that the systems are identifying what work-based credential that he had at that point that is on the form, And once you're able to put that in to the STS system, that would then go back in and put that information so that it does get it.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with the fact that these items should be added to the portal. I think the more that we can do for clarity and ease for our school counselors, we should be considering those things. It's just for the moment, we have this temporary stall until we can get that built out.
All right, so we're going to update the system. In the interim, until it's actually updated, we're going to give that same information that we're asking for on the form. And then at one point, when it's able to be entered in, we will then enter that information. And then we'll achieve the same goal. Okay.
Right, Dr. Davis?
I just want to briefly just state that we are sensitive to the immigration status of our students and privacy concerns, but I believe that we already have to have information around immigration status regarding when EL learners are included in the assessment index, and also whether or not those students are receiving Title III funding. So I think that there is a way for us to collect this data that builds on information that is already being collected and that is careful to guide student privacy concerns. And so we absolutely want to do that, and I appreciate you superintendently reiterating that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Garvey?
Yeah, a question for the superintendent. Mr. Superintendent, did I understand you right to say that this motion redefines proficiency to mean approaching basic?
I think that the intent of, I think the intent is that what Dr. Murphy's motion intends to do is to parallel what is required for students passing LEAP, which is approaching basic, with this particular appeals process. And that's what she's trying to state out and have approved in this motion. My concern around that is anything that we're moving towards that would redefine proficiency in the state other than mastery. And so that's what I just wanted to call out, that in Bulletin says that proficiency is mastery. 118 says proficiency is mastery. The policy does not say, in its present form, prior to an additional vote of this board, the policy in its present form does not say that approaching basic shall be considered as proficiency. And my appreciation is that that's what you're trying to do through this motion.
Is to clarify, for the sake of the appeal process, what the requirement is for students. So I'm not trying to redefine proficiency in the other bulletin. Proficiency is not defined in this bulletin, and I want to clarify, for the sake of the students who will be doing the appeals process, that it's at the same level as the students as if they were taking the test.
Superintendent says that this motion would violate the bulletin. I would suggest that we should vote against it.
I guess I'm not sure how it violates the bulletin when proficiency isn't defined in this particular bulletin.
My comment to that is that I believe it would take an action of this board to define approaching basic as proficiency for this particular policy, because otherwise proficiency is defined as mastery. And prior to this conversation this morning, had you asked me to define proficiency for this process, I would have said proficiency is mastery.
Great. Mr. Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. I think this is the appropriate time to raise my concern, and I don't want to miss an opportunity at the end of this lengthy debate. So I want to share with my colleagues that I appreciate the initial concern that was raised, that was brought before the board. We've got a global issue, we've got a national issue, certainly a state issue, to make sure that we address the concern for successfully transitioning legal immigrants into the public school system so they can be successful in their endeavors in our country, no doubt about it. I respect the emotion and I share the empathy of those that are supporting this initiative. I also recognize that there's typically an outlier on most every issue that we address. And that gives us reason to consider an appeals process. But I'm personally opposed to an appeals process. However, my consistent concern throughout this particular proposal, I think is addressed on page 29 of your handout. I would ask you guys, members, colleagues, to take a look at page 29 of your handout today. And as I read from that, it says that with regard to the testing, that during and after each test administered, the department conducts a number of data forensic reviews to ensure proper test administration policies and procedures are followed. These reviews include, but are not limited to, plagiarism, confirming the student took the test at the correct grade level, accommodation audits, and answer change analysis. During the 22-23 school year, the department recorded 1,920 reported voids at 386 different schools across the state. So the standards, the policy that's in place today, the policy that's being proposed today still requires every student to take these tests. Therefore, these students should comply with the rules for taking the test. And we've seen here that there are a significant number of identified plagiarism, acts of plagiarism. The policy, as proposed, provides that if you fail the LEAP test, then you can, where plagiarism is not legal, but if you fail the test, you can generate a portfolio that does allow for plagiarism. In fact, we've actually made plagiarism equitable. If your parents can afford it, you can pay somebody else to create your portfolio. If your parents can't afford it, you can use one of the new generative AI tools to create the portfolio for you. Or you can phone a friend. You can go across the street and have your friend who's already created the portfolio. You can copy it, paste it, put a cover page on it, sign your name to it, and you check the box. So this disturbs me for a number of different reasons. I recall when I was a student, years ago, hearing about Louisiana politics, the corrupted nature of the politics, stealing, the cheating. The reputation was self-inflicted. Today, as I serve on the State Board of Education as an elected member, I recognize that the confidence in government is probably at an all-time low. And people are looking at this board to help us to address that concern. If we're going to implement a policy that teaches our future leaders, if you fail, it's okay to plagiarize. To use someone else's work, to claim it for your own, and then be rewarded for it. So my respected colleagues, I ask you to consider your constituents. Are these the values that your constituents want to see in Louisiana's future leaders? Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Morris. Like you, I was looking for an appropriate time to make comments as well. Mr. Davis made a comment a little earlier. Mr. Brian Davis with Lobby, and it struck me that he may be correct, which reminded me that I should probably make some remarks with regard to where we are. So, like Mr. Morris, I recognize that there's great passion around this issue, but part of the challenge is that the issue, to some extent, has been lost, and that is, we began this process out of concern for how we were supporting our EL learners in this state. That was an incredibly important issue for all of us. And through much of the debate, all the way up to the governor's office, sometimes I think that issue has really been lost. And so I've been reelected. I'm also a political pragmatist, and I understand that with the change of politics and administration Mr. Davis, you may very well be correct. I understand that. I think lots of others understand that. And because we have two new Bessie members here today and probably others listening in, and this issue will most certainly come back up again with the next Bessie, I'll sort of remind everyone about the initial issue that began all of this. And that is for those students whose voices may not be heard, who may not have opportunities to fulfill their dream of graduating because of the fact that English is not their first language, but it poses some challenges that we continue to endeavor to try to find solutions for those children. And that is incredibly important. Through this process, we've also come to realize that the state of Louisiana does not have a graduation appeals process, and that we're the only state in the United States not to have such a process. So those two issues, they may be the same or treated in one policy, but maybe they're bifurcated and they're addressed separately. Those are also two very important issues that I hope don't get lost in the politics of navigating the transition of leadership and power. So to my colleagues who put a lot of time into getting this policy and elevating those conversations, I continue to support the policy. In complete recognition, Mr. Davis, that it may be changed in maybe a month or two. But I continue to do so that no one will forget the very important issues that have been elevated because of Dr. Bofi and Dr. Davis's work, and that will probably continue on. So I know there's great political interest. It's going to pass because there's still 6 votes in favor of it. It'll probably change in about a month when those 6 votes won't be there anymore. But I just would want to remind the public of why we're having this discussion. And we spend a lot of time on process and procedure, and I love it because I'm a lawyer. And so, Mr. Garvey, I love your questions, and I wish we could do it ad nauseum in a different forum. But that's it. I just do, because this is one of the last times we'll address these issues. We'll have one more shot at it in the next meeting, but I really want to make sure that this is not lost on the public as to why we're having this very important conversation. Ms. Gorsuch.
Mr. Castillo gave his comments much more eloquently than I can, but I totally agree with everything you said, other than the fact that I will not be on Bessie when the new board comes on. But having been in education over 50 years, I can remember back when there was no accountability in terms of leak testing or state standardized testing. We only had national assessments. I also taught in all boys public high school, and I saw boys come through with ACT scores in the teens, in the composite, and SAT scores, if they were taking that would have been comparable. And I've seen these people, these kids that have come through, who are now owning their own businesses, running government agencies, being the CEO of parishes and governments, and who have done extremely well. They just did not test well on that one test. Now, I say that when I realize the blood, sweat, and tears we put into the state assessment system. I think some of these things are above grade level. I'm not even going to go into all of that. I don't think they're vertically aligned in terms of scale scores, in terms of growth and such. I think the system is lacking in lots of ways. But having said that, this particular policy is demanding that students who would be going through this appeals process has an industry-based certification or a work piece level that the workforce recognizes, or a TOPS Tech designation, which is an ACT score plus a course of study. There are many of these students who are ready to graduate and go into good-paying jobs. And the fact that Louisiana is the only state in the entire country with no appeals process should resonate out there. And it should say to people, some people who are opposing this, hey, well, why don't we have a field process, and what should it entail? All right, going through that, the particular motion that is here, and we're quibbling with proficiency, is that mastery? These are two English words, mastery and proficiency, that are used in contexts that are not necessarily in the accountability system. If we say in an English language, we want kids to have a mastery of the standards, we're not saying they have to score at the mastery level unless we spell it out in a bulletin. That scoring at that level means this. If we use the English word proficiency and say, and I don't have the policy in front of me, but from what I remember, it is that they would have proficiency in certain areas. It does not say in this policy that they must score at the proficient level. If the policy said they must score at the proficient level, then maybe we have to go back and find out what the proficient level is. But if you're saying that we can't use the words proficiency and mastery of concepts without equating them to a certain level, to me, takes those two words out of the context of what we would be writing in a passage. So I'm comfortable with the language on here, because I don't think our policy says that the students must score at the proficient level, which you might then say is defined in the accountability bulletin. So I don't think defining the proficient level as mastery in a particular bulletin says we can never use the word proficiency in the English language when we're talking in a different bulletin, unless we specify the certain level that it must be scored at. So I really think that this language means what it means. And we also have, we do allow other students who may have barriers, like our able-bodied kids, to put forth portfolios that demonstrate the mastery of the concept at the level that they are able to do so. So, for all those reasons, I guess I'm in favor of the motion, and I would implore the new Bessie board, the public, all these organizations to look at what is good for kids. If we're the only state in the country with no appeals process, and you're saying that that we have higher standards because of that, I mean, that doesn't really help anyone. I mean, we're only one of 8 states that still require these exit exams, because most of them have done the research and figured out this is not necessary for that diploma. And then of those 8 states that still require it, we're the only one with no appeals process. That does not make sense. Thank you.
Yes. In the meantime, I'd like to just invite Mr. Brian Davis back to the seating area. Mr. Drummond?
Well, I was going to ignore this, and I probably still should, but I've heard numerous times that we're the only state that doesn't have the appeal process. If you look at Texas, they have 5 assessments, and you can only appeal 2. If you look at Florida, the only students that can appeal are EL kids in their first 2 years in the country. So that is a nuanced process, state to state. So I just want to make sure that we appreciate that that is a little different.
Good. So, Mr. Davis, so I've always told my friends that when they see me up here playing on my phone, that I'm actually communicating with constituents and stakeholders and advocates, and we're not moving off of here. So there's lots of conversation and wonderful dialogue, and so Mr. Davis and I were having a wonderful conversation. And I really wanted him to highlight a point that he raised to me, if you didn't mind sharing it with the board.
Yeah, so as you know, Lobby has been opposed to the appeal for all students basically since the inception of this. But we would not be opposed to doing a bifurcated appeal for only EL students. Oops, sorry. We would still be opposed to doing it for all students, but EL students, I think we would not be opposed to that whatsoever. I don't know if that's even a possibility to do that today, or if that's something that you'd have to come back and work on the next board. But either way, we'd be not opposed to that, and we'll work with the board on that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Davis. It, again, will likely be an item on the next SC agenda. Ms. Orange-Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. So some of us have been here for quite a while. And there's two things about this particular moment that feel distinctive from my standpoint as I round out my 12th year here. The first is, in my 12 years sitting on the state board, having the great privilege of representing the interests of students, families, educators across District 2, I have never seen the kind of family, student, educator voice that has gone into the crafting and the co-creation of this policy. Okay, in my 12 years. I'll tell you what I have seen. I've seen groups of very powerful advocates sit in rooms and create policies that BESI members then adopt and vote on, year after year after year, right? I've seen the department execute significant leadership in the crafting of incredible policies that the board adopts, right? But I have never seen the kind of collective leadership that I have seen from hundreds, if not thousands of families, students themselves coming to the microphone. You say, let's listen to our constituents, coming to the microphone, sharing their stories about the ways in which they are fighting for opportunities and chances at life, right? If we believe in democracy, we have to listen to our constituents, not just powerful people who have special interests. I'm not sure who their constituents are. I understand many of them care deeply about children. But this is a case where we literally heard from families who crafted it for us. It didn't start with Dr. Davis. It didn't start with Dr. Bolte, right? It didn't start with me. It didn't start with anyone else who decided to support this policy. It actually started with the public, right? So the reason why I think there's been all of these sort of like, barrier upon barrier versus, visible no, that it's malfeasance, that it has been because I think, and this is where you and I might disagree, Mr. Castile, that the next board will be faced with making a decision where they're either going to execute their significant power to override the will of the public, right, and listen to a small but very powerful group of advocates, right, or continue to work with this department to implement a policy that might change the lives for less than 1,500 students a year. We have 750,000 students that we serve on this board every single day, right? This policy, because of the threshold we put in around 3%, will never impact more than 1,500 of those students. A minor number, but for those 1,500 students, this could be the life-changing opportunity that gives them a chance at life. And that's what gets lost in all the politics and the legal shenanigans and everything else, but this could change their lives. And it isn't just L students. Yes, we have been moved by students who came to this country who are in the 11th grade, who have 3.8 GPA, who've done everything right. And the only thing stopping them from having a productive life going on to a successful college career is that they cannot translate the word photosynthesis on their science exams. Yes, I'm compelled, and I'm glad that you are as well by that. But what about the student that has been fighting cancer their entire junior year for their life, who also has a 3.8, who while their peers are getting ready for prom and everything else, they're back and forth from Baton Rouge to New Orleans for chemo treatments. And they cannot pass one of 4 exams. That is the only thing standing in their way of graduating with their peers. Why don't they also deserve an opportunity to determine their proficiency in another way? I'm sorry, their competency in another way. Like, these are real lives. These are real children. Real children whose lives will be impacted by this forever. That's the first thing I've learned, is that we need to center the people of this state. When they come forward and say this is what they want, then we should listen to them. That's our job as BESI members. And here's the second thing that distinguishes this moment. I have never, in my 12 years, and you could challenge me if you can think of other examples, those of us have been here for a very long time, where a majority of the board have spoken, and yet we cannot move forward with the implementation of a bill or policy. When has that happened? How is that democratic? 6 members on this board have voted consistently, and yet we are still litigating. It's been asked and answered, Mr. Morris. It was asked and answered in June, it was asked and answered in October. We have had the debate, and I appreciate the passion on all sides, but the democratic process has spoken. 6 members of this board have said, that's the majority, that we would like to move forward. We have directed the department to take a set of actions, and yet there are still shenanigans. First time in 12 years. So regardless of where you are on this policy, to Dr. Bopey's earlier point, ultimately we have to preserve our job, the function, and the role that we play as DESI members. And at the end of the day, that's bigger than any idea that we might have, that we might disagree on. There's a bigger purpose about executing the democratic process if we believe in it. And for me, that is what this is about at this moment. And so I urge my fellow board members, can we please move on? The students have spoken, the families have spoken, the majority of the board has spoken. Can we move on? The reason I think we can't is because it won't be very easy for the next board to come in and just overturn this. Why? Because families care about this. Students care about this. Their lives will be impacted by this. So it will not be easy. It might be. Good luck. I'm ready to move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Orange-Jones. Mr. Garber.
Yeah, since the issue of what students who might be affected by this policy, what options they have, has come up. I'd like to ask the superintendent if he would describe the dual enrollment course that he has envisioned that would help get these students college credit and an entrance into college and a chance at achieving a college degree, even if they don't pass the test.
Yeah, this was early in the process, Mr. Garvey, but what we were attempting to do is to work with LCTCS and see if there was a way in which students in their senior year who are in this particular situation where they haven't passed the assessment could be enrolled both at their high school and also with a community college and be taking coursework at the community college which would apply towards a 2-year degree, but also be getting requisite skills to be successful in a high set. And so the goal was that they could be enrolled in a process where they would be dual enrolled, earn credit, be able to transition to community college, and also being prepared for the high set examination. That's a set of conversations we had with LCTCS. Probably we stopped those conversations a couple of months ago just because we needed to see where this landed. But I still do believe it's an opportunity that should be considered moving forward because I think it would create a pathway for students from high school into a community college and then potentially work or career.
And if I could sum it up, that is to say that even if this policy were to fail, this would be a way for students who don't pass the LEAD test to get their foot in the door for a college degree.
Yeah, I think Superintendent Boucher, you probably already might, but she's going to say we can already do it. But the reality is it's only happening in a very small number of places. There are only, I think, 13, 14 centers where this is happening at present. We've had conversations with LCTCS. We want to try and align here on this item to make it a more robust opportunity to scale for students across the state. So I do think moving forward it's something that should be pursued regardless of what happens with this particular policy.
Sounds like a wonderful solution to the problem. I encourage you to keep working on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. Ms. Boucher.
I'm glad y'all brought that up. That possibility exists today. These students, as 11th and 12th graders, are already earning, in many cases, college credit because they qualify to take general education at the college level, NCTE courses at the college level. So many of these students will graduate with dual enrollment credits, with industry-based certifications as a result of CTE courses. Now, the HiSET test, you know, I've been in business a long time. We used to administer it here before we moved it over to the LCT system, CTCS system. You know, there are some organizations that will not recognize a HiSET as a real high school diploma. Some of the military, I don't know if they still do. When you get to the Army, but to the more elite groups, you could not without a regular high school diploma. They have changed, but I know years ago that's what it was. There is no reason that these kids should settle for a HiSET when many of them have already earned college credit. So that pathway that you're describing now already exists for juniors and seniors in high school to take these particular courses at the community college and be successful and earn the credit. They'll have college credit, but no high school diploma under our current system.
So the military does accept HiSET. I'm not sure about some of the,
The more
military
elite
academies.
ones.
I'm not certain about that.
Right.
What does not exist, which is what we were trying to create with LCCS, is a specific course that is embedding HiSET preparation with particular dual enrollment courses. I agree with what you're saying. There are students that take
It's
dual
already
enrollment.
there.
I've got that. But what I'm sharing with you is what I've learned in our conversations with LCCS is that there is an opportunity for dual enrollment credit that embeds HiSET training into the particular dual enrollment. That's what we were trying to do. I'm not suggesting students aren't already taking dual enrollment credit. They absolutely are.
And that can be done. Those kids who are looking at a HiSET can be concurrently enrolled in those courses. So that opportunity exists.
All right, great. This has been healthy discussion and debate. Are we prepared now to call the question? All right. Can we read back the motion that's now pending before the board, please?
Motion by Dr. Bofi to direct the department to update student transcript system with the appeal as an option and require the identification of industry-based credential, TOPS tech, or work keys, and clarify in department guidance pursuant to the ESEA. The state academic content standards shall apply to all public schools and public school students in the state and include the same level of achievement expected of all students. Therefore, the department shall define content proficiency around the granting of a diploma through the appeal process on the same level as that of student graduating without the appeals process. Seconded by Dr. Davis.
All right. There's been a motion. There's been a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bovee?
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Davis?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Ellis?
No.
No. Mr. Garvey?
No.
No. Ms. Holloway?
No.
No. Mr. Mallorin?
No.
No. Mr. Morris?
No.
No. Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Rock?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Boucher?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Castile?
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes.
All right. Any additional items with respect to this item that's up for discussion? If not, next item, please.
Your next item is on page 67, item 5.2, consideration of an update report regarding the accountability work group. The recommendation is to receive the reports, and additional documentation has been distributed.
Can I get a motion to receive? Dr. Davis and seconded by Ms. Ellis. Dr. Roman?
Yes, sir. Just want to recognize this particular work group that has been meeting, specifically looking at better understanding of growth methodology within the state of Louisiana, and then once a growth methodology has been determined, what then is the weight or value of said methodology. I want to personally just thank Mr. Morris for all the time that you've invested, not just during the meetings, but behind the scenes and trying to facilitate this process. Thank you for that. And want to recognize Dr. Bofi and Mr. Steele and Ms. Davis and Ms. Holloway for your participation in these very often technical discussions about student growth. And so I just want to offer my thanks for that. And then I'll pass to Mr. Morris as the chair of this particular group to make the report, and would share with you that we have disseminated the report to you this morning.
Thank you, Superintendent Brown. I'm not going to go into the detail in the weeds on the report, but just to summarize the activity, the idea here is really to set this next board up for success. And I think that's obviously in everyone's interest. And we all recognize, I think, that accountability is going to be part of the discussion for the next board. So I think that growth is a significant component, consideration of accountability. One thing that flagged for me in the effort that we went through with this board to address concerns about accountability was that, in fact, we had a handful of schools that their SPS score was an F, but their growth score was an A. I just don't see how you look a teacher in the face and tell them that you exceeded all expectations. You got the highest score possible. You got an A. And sorry, your school is an F. And for me, that just didn't compute. So it tells me there's just something wrong with the algorithm. I didn't at the time have a sense of how big the problem was, but that's problem enough to look a little deeper. And so as Dr. Bromley stated, the approach that we took was to reach out, bring national experts to the table, and help them to ask them to help us appreciate our current situation and what some of the options are. So the deliverable for them and for the department is to bring to the next BESI a document in layman's terms that explains the base case today for growth assessment in the state of Louisiana. And with that basis, the new board can look at that and decide if this is okay, if this is what we want to go forward with for our students. If not, then what this group of experts has done is put together a list of options. And so the next board can look at that list of options. The list includes pros and cons of each of the options. We asked them for a financial estimate for implementation of each option, some estimate of resources that would be required to implement the option, and then also some estimate for the runway. If the next board did choose to consider another option, how long would it take to transition from where we are today to that option? So that's the essence of this report. I'm looking forward to working with the next board to give it consideration, but certainly welcome comments from this board now as well.
Thank you, Ms. Morris, and I will echo Dr. Brumley's earlier comments and acknowledge your leadership on this issue. It's an incredibly important topic. We are getting way into the weeds of how we calculate growth, but I too agree that it's one of the most important topics that we're going to address for the reasons that Mr. Morris mentioned. So I'll say again to the new BESI members who will be joining us, please pay close attention to the report presented by our team of experts and the information that they're gathering, and we're going to dig into this, I'm sure, in greater detail next term. Any questions, comments? And then for other BESI colleagues, Ms. Holloway, Dr. Davis, Dr. Murphy, thank you for your service in that committee as well. All right. There was a motion to receive. I don't see an objection to that motion, therefore that motion passes. Next item.
The next item is on page 71, item 5.3, consideration of the timeline and process for establishment of the Computer Science Content Standards Committee. The recommendation is to approve the timelines and process as outlined. An updated slide deck has been distributed.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve that? Mr. Rock, seconded by Mr. Murphy. Mr. Superintendent.
Yeah, thank you. So this is actually a really exciting item, and it marks something really important for the future of students in the state of Louisiana. What we are asking you to approve is a process for us to write the state's first ever computer science standards. And we realize that there is a lot of work and a lot of energy happening around the country with STEM and artificial intelligence and how to keep the students safe and what students should know. And so what we're actually proposing that we launch here today for the first time in our state's history is a process to develop computer science standards for the state of Louisiana and the students that call Louisiana home. And so Dr. Chasson is going to make this presentation.
Dr. Chesson, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Good morning, everyone. So just to provide a little bit of history and context, and then a brief presentation this morning about the proposed process that is modeled after other standards review processes that have come before this board and taken place over the last several years. It all began during the 2022 regular legislative session when the Louisiana Computer Science Education Advisory Commission was created, and that commission has been hard at work over the past several years to set forth some recommendations, the first of which is to pursue the creation of an inaugural set of K-12 computer science standards. And so in October, you all received that report with 6 different recommendations. And in October, at that meeting, you all requested the department to begin the process for establishment of a content standards committee. This is all grounded in our vision for K-12 computer science, which is to increase digital literacy skills in all students through actively engaging with progressional computer science experiences that prepare students for success in society and with future career opportunities. There are several goals of the computer science standard process, and they all revolve around what we want our graduates to be able to do. Our graduates will apply analytical and critical thinking skills to real-world situations, demonstrate digital literacy and digital citizenship, and utilize technology skills as employable citizens to meet present and future workforce needs. So these will be K-12 standards that really emphasize K-12 exposure to computer science that culminates in grades 9 through 12, with students attaining either computer science industry-based credentials and/or college credits from an increasingly diverse number of professions that we know now rely on computer science skills. The Commission's report that you all received back in October offers guidance to the computer science standard setting process through both its framework and 4 key recommendations. The recommendations form a skeleton that can be utilized to frame the work of the committee by starting with broad concepts that we know are most important in computer science education, and then vertically aligning those with specificity. Similar to other standards review committees in the past, this review committee will be structured as seen here on this slide. The 9-member steering committee will guide the process and ensure that there is a vertical alignment in the standards. The steering committee will make the final recommendation on revisions to the standards for BESI. The grade band work groups, which will be composed of teachers and members with specific content expertise, will create and revise standards for the steering committee to discuss and vote on. LDOE's role will be to facilitate the process by presenting BESI's goals to the steering committee and work groups, by providing resources to frame the process, like examples from other states, and by providing technical support upon request. The 9-member steering committee proposed in front of you will be composed of members from each of the 3 proposed grade band work groups. The steering committee will work to assure that the digital literacy skills, progressional alignment of computer science skills, and connections to careers are all appropriately represented. 3 grade band work groups will be established to maximize the efficiency of the writing process and to center the group's discussions. These work groups will make grade band standards that align vertically across. As each grade band progresses in their work, their steering committee members will then report back to the steering committee to present those outcomes to the entire steering committee. Through strategic collaboration, the work bands will progress systematically through the process of the standards creation. The department will work with its partners in LSTEM, higher education, and school systems to encourage all interested parties to apply. The application will be open for a 1-month period and will allow applicants to reach out to our team with any questions they might have about the application process. Candidates will be reviewed upon the application window closure, and application scoring will occur through an objective process detailed here. The department will bring those recommendations to Bessie in April. So this next slide shows the timeline. We plan to release the application in January for a 1-month period, push it out through all of our communication channels that we have available. Upon receipt of those, we will objectively review through a blind scoring process, and then bring those committee member recommendations to you all at the April Bessie meeting. The committee convenings will occur between April and July, when they'll really dig into the work and draft the computer science standards. There will be a 2-month period to receive public comment and input on the standards. And we are proposing that the standards are presented at the October 2024 Bessie meeting for consideration and hopefully approval. This would allow time for a training period for teachers for professional development during the spring and summer of 2025. And optimally, Louisiana students and teachers could begin utilizing the computer science standards by the start of the 25-26 school year. As Dr. Brumley said, we are really excited to kick off this process. We know how important it is for our state to have a set of really robust and comprehensive computer science standards. So we're excited to start this work and take this on. We look forward to having a really amazing steering committee and work group members. And we know that we have a strong vision here for computer science and STEM, and that ultimately our students will benefit from having the skills and knowledge to achieve bright STEM futures. I also want to acknowledge that Mr. Morris has been a valuable member of the Computer Science Commission over the last several years. So that concludes my presentation. I'll answer any questions, Mr. Morris. I don't know if you have any further comments about the work of the commission.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Chesson. Any comments, Ms. Morris? Go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple comments and a question. So first of all, I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Chesson, and all the folks that contributed to this effort. I think we're obviously in catch-up mode here. It's definitely a high priority. We recognize that. We've got a game plan. We've got a timeline. First question, on the timeline, it says application to serve released in January 2024. Can you help me understand, for folks that would be interested in participating in this and serving on the committee, how are they made aware of that opportunity? How does that work?
So we'll push it out through all of our normal communication channels, so things like our newsletter, our regular webinars to school systems, but we'll also make sure that everyone else who's been a part of the commission knows about it and is able to spread that word. We'll make sure that our higher ed partners and also the STEM is aware. Really depend on our commission members as well to try to do as much outreach as possible so that we make sure that we are really attracting our computer science experts.
Okay, so we are engaging folks at the college and university level. Great. Okay, my question, again, I really appreciate the timeline here. We've got some clear expectations, but we note here that LDOE provides teacher training for implementation in 25-26. So, the world we live in today, everybody's trying to keep up with technology. And personally, I would say, the kids are ahead of the adults. The kids are setting their own curve, and adults, we're here trying to make best efforts to set the rules for the game as we figure out how the technology works. So the elephant in the room is the generative AI tools that are out there today. What are the rules for that game? How do we get those rules in place in a timely manner? So we don't just communicate anything or have expectations are ambiguous. People get in trouble because they don't understand the rules because there are no rules. So my understanding is that the way the department is going to handle the issue is, to some extent, it is going to fall under the umbrella of computer science. So I'm just looking for some general guidance here from the department with regard to expectations going forward, particularly for the Teacher Leader Summit in June, and then obviously for the start of school in the fall. Just give us a sense of what your thoughts are where this process is going to go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think what we're discussing here are two related but independent issues. One is creating the standards, the educational standards for K-12 students in computer science. And the other issue that I know that we need to solve for is guidelines to inform teachers and educators around best practices with something like AI, and how do we keep kids safe and data privacy, and what are best practices. So I think that what will happen is we'll have this computer science educational set of standards, but we'll probably be, our intent is rather to compile a work group looking at what are best practices and safeguards related to AI. It'll be a different group, certainly related work.
Any other questions from the board? We have one public comment, Dr. Juana Morena. Dr. Morena is with the Bureau of Finance Program, and she's here to provide information. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you for listening to me. So it's mostly some questions. I'm faculty at Louisiana State University Physics and also the Center of Computational Technology, and here represented the BMI program, as Mr. Castillo just said. This is a federally funded program to expand computer science education, funded by the National Science Foundation and also the U.S. Department of Education. So looking at the composition of the committee, of all the committee, I have two questions. First one is for the grade band 912 and also for the whole committee. Several members have to come from teachers that in computer science that teach IBC courses. So from the work on the commission, we receive information from the Department of Education that currently there is only 224 certified computer science teachers, computer science employees in public schools. From those 224, there is only currently 140 teachers certified in computer science. So I assume from those 140 will be just a minority of those teachers doing IBCs. So I wonder that there will be enough applicants that qualify for those 3 spots, given that the total of all the certified computer science teachers are 140. My second question is the representatives from higher education are divided in two. Higher education computer science representatives have higher education cybersecurity representatives. So I wonder, computer science is a huge field. I wonder why just cybersecurity was picked. I mean, there is data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, there is networking, interactive computing, human-computer interaction. I mean, I could be here 5 minutes, so I will pass the time, mentioning areas of computer science. So I wonder why that distinction, because again, that limits the number of faculty that could apply. You have to identify in what bucket you are sending your application. And finally, about the timeline, there is only 4 months for the committee to develop the guidelines. So I don't know if that will be enough time, given also that it's the summer months. It's from April to July. In addition, to receive public comment is just in summer, July and August, when all the teachers are out of the schools. All the people in the university also is out of the school. So I wonder if that's the best time to come with those standards. That's all. Thank you.
Dr. Morena, thank you for your comments. How long have you been a professor at LSU?
At LSU, 15 years.
15 years, all right. Dr. Roman, can you comment on the questions raised by Dr. Moran?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important issues that she raises is the timing issue. And what I would suggest to this board is no different than what we have done with previous standards, is that if the committees or the steering committee or the work group or the department or the board feels like more time is needed, we'll just inform the board of that, and then we can make adjustments to the schedule. But this is a starting place of where we can set out. And if we find, once we get into that process, that an adjustment of schedule is made, we can bring that adjustment back to the board for consideration.
The second part, as it relates to the zeroing in on cybersecurity as opposed to the other many areas of computer science that could be captured. Can you also speak to that issue as well?
Well, I don't think it can be overstated the need to have someone with expertise in student data and privacy protection on these particular committees. And that's why we have called out cybersecurity representative to have that level of expertise on each committee. But we do have an additional space for a higher education computer science representative. So we do feel it's important to have the cybersecurity person on there, on each committee, just because of the threats that could cause to students and their privacy, not just now, but for the future.
Mark? Any other questions, comments from the board? Dr. Morena, as always, thank you for your engagement, both here and individually, to help us facilitate this process. So please stay in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, there is a motion to approve. Any objection to that motion? Hearing, seeing none, that motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is on page 86, item 6.1, consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding financial literacy and foreign language coursework. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent revisions to bulletin 741 and 741 non-public.
Making a motion to approve. Dr. Davis, seconded by Ms. Holloway. Report, Dr. Roman? All right, it's in the packet. Any questions, comments from the board? Any objections? Motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is on page 106, item 6.2, consideration of revisions to bulletin 1573, complaint management procedures regarding special education complaints. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent revisions to bulletin 1573.
I get a motion to approve. Dr. Davis, seconded by Mr. Moran. The report, Dr. Cronin?
Yes, sir. I would start the report by indicating that Meredith Jordan, who leads diverse learners, including students with disabilities in the work there, is ill. She has the flu, and I think her whole entire family may have the flu. So prayers for her, but she does send her regrets. She wanted to be here, and so unfortunately, instead of Meredith providing this presentation, you get me. So this is an update on special education infrastructure and improvement. I want to call out just from the beginning that if you look to the actual policy, and I think that's page 173 in your packet, and you are able to locate that, the actual policy that we're electing to provide, I think it's 173. And you go down to the bottom and you look at the historical notes, you will see that this particular policy has not been updated since 2003. So 20 years has passed since this particular policy has been updated, and clearly it's a time and a place to go ahead and make these updates. As you all know, we at the department commissioned an independent commission on dispute resolution processes of the agency. We also had the Louisiana Legislative Auditor conduct a performance review of dispute resolution at the agency. That report was shared out to you at one of our previous meetings. So what we wanted to do today is, in response to some of the questions that were raised at the last meeting, share some information with you. The majority of that is in your backup, but also wanted to provide some information and also share a change in policy that has been endorsed by SEEP, which I think is really positive. So let's move to the first slide. One of the questions that was asked is a look at total staffing at the department. And And so all we did is we went back and we started with 2010. I will tell you that prior to 2010, the number of positions in the department was even greater than in 2010. But as you can see, over time, the number of employees in the department has been reduced all the way down to 445. And then you see the jump up to 574. And so you have to wonder, well, that's a significant jump. That's over 100 employees. What's the prompt behind that? This is when the Early Childhood Division was shifted from DCFS to the Department of Education. And so when that happened, programmatically that work came to the department, but also those employees were from civil service shifted to the department. That held constant for a couple of years there, and then you see the reduction again, and that is when Special School District was removed from the LDOE and was created as its own independent LEA. And so what you see is a continued decline of department employees. You see the addition of the entire early care and education space throughout the entire state of Louisiana, and then you see our current numbers of staffing there at 495. Next slide. There was a question around the number of individuals employed and are coded through IDEA funds. And so these are essentially individuals serving for full-time or part of their time working with issues relative to students with disabilities. And you can see in 2011 that number was at a high around 89 employees. In 2014 it dropped to a low of 40. And we've increased that over the last year. We're back up to 38 after a low of 32. I will provide information here that we have included a request in our executive budget for 6 additional FTEs that would be specifically housed with the monitoring team. And we know that we have a different performance audit that is coming from the legislative auditor specific to monitoring. And so we went ahead, because we know that we have had cuts in staffing, we went ahead and decided to go ahead and include that in the executive budget request. And that will have to play itself out legislatively, but we did include that information to provide 6 additional bodies for the monitoring process. We have a set of...
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I still have a question.
Sure. Go right ahead.
The previous one, please. Dr. Brown, I think there was also a question not only the number of employees in the area of that department with IDA funds, but the concern was the IDA budget designated to certain individuals that are employed that are not responsible for IDA work responsibilities, and I don't see any of this here. Meaning that you have employees that are being paid by IDA and they do not have IDEA or SPED responsibilities.
Yeah, so in your backup information, you'll see we provided that information to you all the way back to 2013. So going all the way back to 2013, you'll see the actual positions that are either fully funded or a component of their job is related to students with disabilities and IDEA issues, and so they may have a portion of their overall funding included there, but we provided that in backup all the way back to 2013.
I guess my concern is, I don't know if it's answering the question about, are you looking at the employees and what funds are paying their salaries and their responsibilities? It seems like, I'll repeat again, that there are individuals that are working and being paid by IDEA, but yet have no responsibilities with SPED, whether it's monitoring, compliance, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so with I'm sorry. No, within every office, there is work that must be done or considered relative to students with disabilities, whether you're talking about the assessment and accountability office or teaching and learning or school choice or remedial staff or finance. And so some of those individuals may not be full employees for special ed, but a portion of their day is devoted to that. And so that's where you have that grading of funds that pays a portion of their salary through IDEA. And that's what we've included for all the way back, I think, to 2013. And Beth Zeno is Deputy Superintendent, is here if you have any particular questions about grading.
I understand about grading, but I just want to make sure that the departments are looking into this better. I mean, you're just the expert and has done an amazing job. But I just want to make certain from what we gathered and have seen that there are employees that are getting paid by IDA funds and not per se doing the work, sped service work. Are you like looking at all this?
Well, Beth Sienna with the Department of Education, we take very seriously looking at any coding of federal funds to any staff. There are federal rules that say you can have, certain people coded there. We have to document their time and effort in order to substantiate their contributions to the federal programs. So we do look at that on an annual basis. We have them, think about their staff, their managers get with them. They make sure that they are doing that work. And if there's any coding adjustments, we make that at the appropriate time. But we do take very seriously that there is a rule that says you can have, a small 5 to 10% of if someone has some interaction with special education, because there are, some jobs in the agency that maybe it only happens a couple times a year. But we do look at that very, very closely to make sure we're in, compliance with the federal regulations.
I believe Dr. Berlin, that came up with the legal audit and the individuals in the department that are getting paid, but yet the work isn't being done appropriately. I guess because of the number of employees you have that are underneath the IDA staffing.
Yeah, I'm not aware of the audit raised an issue about individuals being paid with IDA funds that weren't doing special education related work.
I think it's just with that coming forward, there were just a lot of questions coming to us.
I think that there were and will continue to be issues put forward in the performance audit around the department's ability with present levels of staffing around monitoring to continue to do that work. We feel like we have a monitoring system certainly that's approved, but that is why a few things that we've built out over the last year related to monitoring, but also are making this the FTE request of 6 for this next year.
Thank you, Ms. Beth.
So the next two slides, I'm not going to go into them in detail, but you have two sets of key performance indicators. The first slide are key performance indicators that basically align to federal regulations, and then the second set of key performance indicators are more state level KPIs that we have developed. As I mentioned, we did work with SEEP on these. SEEP endorsed these, and SEEP also asked us to consider, I think, a couple of additional KPIs moving forward that we will be considering. I felt like that their requests were, from what I can understand, moving in the right direction. So happy to offer these KPIs. Next slide there. So this is just a strategic improvement focused on this particular area. We're updating the process and procedures. We're updating the website to include information in multiple languages, which was called out in the performance audit. The performance audit indicated that one of the access challenges that families were facing was that it wasn't available in multiple languages. So we're trying to, or have essentially, but we'll continue to update that for multiple languages, and then also trying to continue to provide additional stakeholder resources. This is just a look at some of the proactive support that we provide. Teacher Leader Summit opportunities for special ed teachers and leaders. We've recently had our regional special education tours. We have our SPED Leader Collaboratives and office hours monthly. We are now in our third and fourth grouping of the SPED Fellows, which is the opportunity to develop new special ed leaders for systems, and we have experienced seasoned special education directors helping with that work across the state, updates to the website, upcoming statewide compliance modules, and then some of the family supports. One of the areas that both our commission report, commission study, as well as the legislative audit called out was the need for more opportunity for family engagement from the agency, and so we did move some staffing to be able to accomplish this, and we created the state's, Louisiana's first ever special education ombuds person. And she is here, so I wanted to introduce just for Chastity, if you'll wave at us, but Chastity Hatfield. Right here is the new special ed ombuds person for the department. She comes to us highly recommended from the, actually from the Central Community School System, where she served as an educational diagnostician. In my first opportunity to meet with her, the first few things that she said is, how can we give more access to families, and how can we make the process more efficient? And so I'm like, you're on the right track. That's exactly what we need. So happy to have her. Family support partnerships will continue to work there, building out the library of resources. As you know, we have hired a new special ed attorney that handles dispute resolution when they come in, and Ty is in the back. We met him last month. And so those are a few of the supports that we have available. Next slide. I want to call out in the actual policy, if you go to that policy again, on page 173, a few things here. The first is we are changing in policy, basically that if a complaint lacks all of the required information, the agency for a period of time was just using a process that was where if the complaint did not have full information, it was dismissed, it wasn't investigated or reviewed. So we're changing in policy, whereas that if a complaint comes in, it doesn't have all the right information, that the department would then seek back out with the individual who is attempting to make the complaint to make sure that we ascertain all of the important information so that we can process that complaint. Also, another change I'd call out is that we are going to create a complaint log that we have at the agency, and it includes but is not limited to documenting the date received, the name of the complainant, the LEA, the school, the allegation type, and the outcome. This is something that was called out in the performance audit from the legislative audit group that they would like us to consider, so we agree, so we're placing that in the policy. Another issue that was called out by the LLA in their performance audit was around communication internally of the department to make sure all the different offices have all of the information around complaints so that everyone can work together better as a team to solve for these. And so we're placing the policy that we will have the date of the complaint, the name of the complainant, school involved, allegation type, and outcome recorded, and then shared with the monitoring team and the special ed program staff to inform quality assurance monitoring and improvement efforts. So the dispute resolution process flows into the legal department. And so what will happen is we'll use the log, and then we'll share that information that we can share as appropriate across to the monitoring team, as well as the special ed program team. So we're adding that into the policy. That was a recommendation from the audit. And then the final addition is beginning in the fall of 24, we will take redacted information regarding the results of formal complaints, and we'll post those to our website. That too was a recommendation from the audit. I also know that this is something that was pretty important to stakeholders in this particular space, and so we will redact information and then post results of formal complaints onto our LDUE website. So we know that this is a process to continue to get better. We think that we've taken some appropriate steps to get better, and we know that we have to continue that work. I think it's important to note again, the way I started this out is this policy has not been visited or altered since 2003. And so it's certainly something that needs to happen today. And the response plan as well as the actual policy adjustments have been not just received, but I believe endorsed by Steve.
Dr. Davis. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
So I do want to reiterate that this was discussed extensively at SEEK and endorsed, and I want to say, right, there's nothing more heartbreaking or concerning than having parents of special education students approaching you as a BESI member around the fact that their students are not being given access to the educational opportunities that they deserve, or even worse, that they have been abused in one of our schools. And so I think that the reforms here, I hope, are going to address some of the things that parents have brought to us, in particular around the confusion that they have about where they need to be going to have their complaints heard. I hope that the ombudsman is going to kind of be that point person for parents to be able to go to figure out what they have to do in this process. We are going to be adding dispute resolution charts, flow charts that hopefully will give parents a better understanding about where they can access the dispute resolution process and where it should be flowing. There was discussion at SEEK around adding a KPI around the monitoring of IEPs around the state. There is no doubt that the ability of the state to ensure compliance with IEPs has declined with the loss of all of these positions. These positions have consequences for our special education students, and so I'm heartened that we are going to be adding staff to deal with that, but there needs to be more. And when you hear districts say that they miss having teams from the Department of Education routinely entering their schools to audit their IEP process, because that is a way, like the folks that are in charge of special education know that that is one way to hold their upper administration's focus around special education students. And so we need to figure out a better way to ensure our monitoring. And then, and finally, I just say I appreciate the opportunity that I've had to serve on SEEK. That's been a real blessing, and I've been really, really fortunate to do that work.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkie.
Thank you for your service in that capacity, Dr. Davis. I actually had that role when I was first on the board and learned so much, and have an incredible appreciation for all the people who work so hard in our state to serve our students with special needs. Superintendent Brumley, I had committed to you and the department staff to share any concerns, and I just wanted to let you know I checked back, and it looks like the outreach that I received was really positive, and that people were supportive of the steps moving forward. There was one with some technicalities about a page being signed, and as we move from submitting paper copies to the digital piece, and so I'm going to go ahead and forward that to you so you have it in writing. I don't think it's something we need to spend a whole lot of time on, but I appreciate you and Ms. Townsend just checking that out, and I'm sorry I didn't get to it before now.
Right, Ms. Lawrence.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. So I appreciate the department's responsiveness to this issue with the creation of the ombudsperson position. I had lunch with our new ombudsperson recently, so I really encouraged by that. Look forward to working with her. But my question is, how are we communicating to stakeholders that this resource is available going forward? And my second question is, how are we communicating to stakeholders the work process for engaging our new resource?
Yeah, no, that's a really important question, Mr. Morris, and it's something we have to get right, so I appreciate you raising that. We have essentially used the first few weeks of Ms. Hatzfeld's time and just allowed her to get her feet under her. This is a new process that we are working to develop. We're also looking at a separate ombudsman position in the agency that already has experience in this, and what things can be shared across there to gain some experience. So that is something that we're still working on. But I will tell you it's important that we get that right. We are committed to that communication. We're just not at that point yet.
Mr. Chair, one other question.
Yes, sir.
Specifically with regards to the KPIs, so I've been advocating for KPIs for some time now. I see a lot of value And the KPIs, if they're focused on actionable items, in the first 4, I can see that, but I just, and Dr. Cronin, I know you're not the subject matter expert here, but just a feedback to folks, the last 2 KPIs, there's no target. It's just NA for target. So I would just ask folks to take another look at that, and, if there is value to the KPI and, it's going to be important to the board, then, I would suggest that we either have comments to support it, or we have a target in place and we understand the basis for the target.
So what you see there, Mr. Morris, is you see the 21-22 that is not available, but we have a 22-23 of 100% target that we're going to try and get. I don't know if that's on your slide.
Yeah, on my slide, it shows NA across the board. Okay, until I get to 22-23. So there was no federal target, there's no current state, and there's no prior state.
Right, because your federal targets are on the first slide. This is the second set of KPIs, which are like state-initiated slides.
Okay.
And some of that, because we've never had this KPI before, we don't have this information, but we're setting the target for 22, 23, and 100.
So whenever the results come in for 22-23, then that will reflect back to the current state.
Yes.
For future stewardship. Great. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Any additional questions or comments from the board? We have 2 public comments. Kathleen Camino would like to provide information, wishes to speak. Chris Rowe with the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates supports the recommendation, wishes to speak. Please state your name and if you represent an organization.
I'm Kathleen Canida from St. Tammany, representing myself. There's just a couple of things for the changes to the 1508. There's no timeline for in which the once the complaint is submitted for there to be a response if it's not complete. I didn't know if that was something that could be added, that they will be contacted in so many days. But with that being said, all of these things, all of these changes would be great. However, unless we have some real oversight and monitoring, none of this is going to be effective. Right now, from what I was told, we only have 6 people who are overspent and then a part-time person. We have over 140 people being paid out of the IDA funds. And then myself and some other advocates, Dr. Bromley and his staff, asked if they could do more on-site monitoring. Let's say every school about 3 years. And they said they didn't have the staff to meet that. And I said, well, how about every 6? That's best practices recommended by the U.S. Department of Education. They said they don't have the staff to do that. If we have 140-something people being paid out of the IDA funds, why can't we utilize those individuals? Another thing is on the application for IDA funds, we only allocated $221,000 for monitoring and enforcement. But then on the last page, it shows we have $6 million for the Leap Connect test for accommodations. I'm not sure why we need $6 million for Leap Connect, but can some of that be used for monitoring? Because that's not enough if we're lacking so severely in this monitoring. And the points that they use for monitoring, the monitoring for IDA is different. It's supposed to ensure that every child is receiving free appropriate public education. The current things that we're using right now, like graduation rate and dropout, participation, statewide assessment, suspension, expulsion, those things will never tell you if these children received aid. They will never tell you if these children are getting their IEPs followed appropriately, if they're receiving their therapies, and it will never tell you if these children are mistreated. And a recent conversation that I've been having with the department is whether or not mandatory reporting is supposed to be followed for employees and volunteers, and I'm being told that it does not have to be followed when an employee is the abuser. I have that from the department in writing. And I can't understand why that is not something that we all agree on that has to be done. If a child is abused, regardless of who it is, a teacher is a mandatory reporter, all employees are. They should have to follow mandatory reporting. I believe we're getting an attorney general opinion on it right now, and I hope that comes back soon, but I think that needs to be something that is not questioned. Mandatory reporting, regardless of if it's in K through 12 or early childhood, must be followed regardless of who the abuser is. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Rowe.
Good morning. I'm Chris Rowe. I'm the parents of two students with disabilities in public charge.
Mr. Microphone
Can you hear me now? The green lights. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Chris Rowe. I'm with the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. I was one of the lead authors on the report that you all reviewed. I also am a parent of two students with disabilities who attend public charter schools in New Orleans. So I'm here today, excuse me, to thank the board for taking action. It is some great first steps, and I think it will bring more transparency and accountability. So thank you for listening to parents. I will say, though, that the report that we did looked at Louisiana compared to the other 50 states in the District of Columbia. And Louisiana was clearly the bottom performer when it came to handling of state complaints. So we have a long ways to go. That's based on pretty much every measure that was included in our analysis. So some of those steps include not only the handling of the complaints, which is obviously very key, but also goes to the training of the staff, the impartiality of staff who are actually investigating those reports, and whether they are sufficiently trained and have sufficient background. So I think those are really important things that need to be looked at as well as ways we actually involve the parents in the process and listening to their voice, listening to their experience. There used to be outreach done to, I think, Superintendent Brumley's point, where the department went around the state helping parents understand that this is an option that's available to them. I think those need to continue as well. So great first steps, but I think we have a ways to go. Other areas that other states use as best practices are extending the timeline to file to 2 years rather than 1 year, and also having an appeals process in place as well to handle perhaps investigations that parents believe were not conducted properly. So those are just a couple of the things. I would also point to the slide on the KPIs. There was one new KPI proposed that looks at the number of complaints that were successfully resolved. It shows currently 100%. I guess I'm asking, how is that defined? Because any metric we looked at did not show 100% of these complaints being resolved. In fact, I believe a large number of them were never even responded to. So I would just question that particular KPI and what that responds to, and how do you actually define resolved? So the last thing I would actually respond to is the new ombudsperson position. Very happy to see that there is some emphasis being placed on that. But if you look at best practices across the country, ombudsman people usually have a level of independence, and they also have a training in legal backgrounds, so that they can actually understand very complicated legal background. So happy to see this person on board, but we would also like to see a level of independence that this person can actually investigate and take on complaints and help parents get to that as well. So thank you.
Great. Thank you both. Ms. Holloway.
Yes, I have a question for Ms. Canino. I'm not quite sure if I got your name.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Kathleen, right? Okay, I can't remember. Can you speak again and verify, what were you indicating about abuse? I was trying to pick up on your conversation about abuse, but I was trying to follow. Am I on the right path in that you're indicating there's abuse in the school system? Or is it parents
No, school system.
in the school system?
Yeah.
So can you please elaborate without, without mentioning student names due to confidentiality?
So there has been, I advocate for parents, and I've been contacted numerous times. Last year in St. Tammany, there was a case that was in the paper where some children that were nonverbal were abused by their teacher and their paraeducators. That paraeducator was, so first of all, the parents were never informed. And when I asked the school district to inform the parents, because I didn't know who the parents were, I just knew what was happening with the children. They said, there's nothing that says we have to, so they did not tell the parents. I called the police and I asked
That the child was abused by
a
the
staff
employee.
member, and they were
Or the
investigating.
teacher.
Well, there was witnesses in the classroom, adults, who reported it to the principal. The principal nor administration contacted the parents and said that we were going to do an investigation. There was an investigation done. They told me there was no findings, but they made those people resign. But there was witnesses, at least 5 adults witnessed what was happening in that class. 5 other adults and all reported it to the principal because that's what the policy says currently. Again, there's no law or policy requiring the school district to notify parents currently, is what I've been told. I asked Dr. Brumley, he had his people look into it. There was no, what he sent back was like a parent's bill of rights, and there was no real teeth to that, so we couldn't go that angle. I later found the dad of one of these children, and I reported to him. He went to the police, and they did an investigation. They arrested one of the parents, and the parent ended up pleading guilty. So in the meantime, those kids were in there for over 6 months. Nobody stopped it. Nobody reported it, and the people that did know about it were not charged with failure to report. So when I was looking through the policies, there's a policy that Forethought, that's a consulting company, does a lot of work with all the school districts, or many of them. And there's a policy separate that is when an employee or a volunteer is accused of abuse, and the steps are different, and they don't follow mandatory reporting. So I brought that to the department's attention because I thought maybe it was just wrong, it was a mistake. But I was told by Ms. Hunt that no, that because a school employee is not considered a caretaker by definition, they do not have to follow mandatory reporting if the abuser is a school employee.
Okay, so what I'm following, Dr. Brumley, seems like a policy or a state.
So let me tell you where we are on this.
Please,
Yeah.
thank you.
So it's an important conversation, and certainly we don't want adults, whether they're the parents of a child, a family, a friend, or an employee of the school, to be abusing a child. Like, obviously, that's the case. DCFS is the agency, and Joan may have to come up if I'm incorrect with some of this, but DCFS is the agency that is responsible for investigating complaints if something happens outside of the school. So teachers are mandatory reporters to DCFS. DCFS will, in essence, investigate that. There's separate statute, basically that, and this is paraphrased, that says that school systems can't basically create a situation that discourages employees from reporting abuse. And so what's at the heart of this question is if a school system has in their policy, and Kathleen mentioned this policy, there are school systems and they have this policy, it's fairly consistent. And it says if you recognize some form of abuse, you report to the principal reports to the system leader, and X, Y, Z happens. And so I think what is in question here, and this is why we are seeking an AG opinion on this issue, is that process that school systems have put in place, which seems to be an orderly process, but does it create gaps, and does it go against the intent of the law that says that no one should be discouraged from making a complaint? complaint. So our question essentially, and the reason we're seeking this opinion, and I'm seeking it as my name on it, my signature, and it is asking, is this policy that sets up the procedure for reporting from inside the school incongruent with the law? And so we have attached a sample policy from one of the school systems that used this particular policy to try and get us an answer here. And so that's like the background. I know that's very much in the weeds, but that's essentially what's happening right now. We hope to get that back in short order.
And if you may, can you bring this forward at our next BESI meeting? The opinion, please. Thank you. And we can go from there.
Thank you.
Just
Dr. Davis.
one quick thing. So given what the gentleman from the Parent and Attorney Association said around kind of national norms around what an ombudsperson kind of training that they need to have for this position, can we get a commitment from the department around professional development that would allow our new person to, if there are areas in which she needs beefing up on in terms of professional development to do this job and to do it with fidelity with an eye towards families, can we get a commitment to get her that training that's necessary? Like, I guess there might be a national group out there that lays out the kinds of certifications and trainings that individuals like this need.
Absolutely, and I would say the same would be true for our special education attorney and special ed staff, and certainly for the ombudsperson, we can do that. And the other thing I would point out is like we're not through. Like, this policy adjustment isn't the end. We're still taking ideas and to see. We know we have an additional performance audit from the LLA that's around monitoring, so that will come out, and I'm certain that will prompt additional policy adjustments that this board needs to consider. And so we're not done. And so yes, we'll commit to that, but also just know that there will be more additional policies coming forward.
Great. Mr. Morris.
Yeah, I want to follow up on the question that was raised about the KPI and 100% achievement. Because I looked through the list, the second one addresses problem resolution prior to the process hearing, which is good. We get some indication of the work that's been done in that step. And then the next one speaks to percent of deviations that resulted in mediation agreements. So that speaks to the next step, which is good, work in progress. And then we get to percent of total parent formal complaints resolved, which to the gentleman's point shows like 100%. So I'd like some clarification too, in the next report, somebody to define resolve, so we get clear understanding there. What is resolved? I appreciate that.
Yeah, I would like to come back with that, Mr. Morris, if I can get our respect with that as well as project that.
All right. Any other questions, comments from the board? We have a motion to approve. Any objections to that motion to approve? Seeing none, the motion passes. Next item, please.
Next item is on page 174, item 7.1, consideration of the summary of public comments and agency response concerning public comment received in reference to the October 20th, 2023 notice of intent regarding Bulletin 135, health and safety. The recommendation is to receive this for CAR, authorize BESI staff to submit the summary report to the legislative oversight committees, and direct BESI staff to proceed with the final adoption of the October 20th, 2023 notice of intent regarding revisions to Bulletin 135 with the submission of the final rule at the appropriate time.
All right, can I get a motion, please? Dr. Davis, seconded by Ms. Holloway. All right, Mr. Superintendent. Do we have any public comment on this side? We do have one. Okay, that is sure. Mr. Evan Alvarez supports the recommendation and wishes to speak. Mr. Alvarez is with the American Heart Association. Please introduce yourself.
Evan Alvarez, American Heart Association. The comments that we submitted originally were done so a little prematurely. However, after further review and discussions with the department, we fully support the rules as is. Evan Alvarez with American Heart Association. The public comment that we originally submitted was done so a little prematurely. However, after discussions with the department and further review, we fully support the rules as promulgated and feel like they will ultimately go on to save lives in Louisiana.
Great. Thank you, sir. Superintendent Brown, anything else?
No, we just appreciate Evan's engagement here as well as the Heart Association altogether. Just an update, this will be of interest to Superintendent Bochet for sure. I believe allocations are coming after the January meeting for the AED.
That's what I was going to ask, for the allocations to be available.
So see, we had this good system here when we will after January meeting.
Great. Thank you. Any comments from the board? No additional comments, questions, any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes. Next item.
That concludes the agenda.
We are adjourned.